Hi.
Hello guys, if you are brand new to my channel, my name is Nikki and this is my book nook. Y'all, I had the realization last week that I have never done an actual book recommendation video on this channel. Obviously, I review books all the time. I do monthly wrap-ups where I talk about books that I've read and say whether or not I would recommend them, but I've never done a video with a consolidated list of books all centering around one topic that I would recommend. So once I realized that, I just knew that the first book recommendation video that I would want to do on my channel is this one. I'm talking about books that every person should read at some point in their life. And I just want to clarify when I say that, these books I'm about to talk about are not necessarily my favorite books of all time. Some of them definitely are, but altogether, these are all books that in one way or another have strongly impacted me. Maybe they left me thinking, they taught me something new, they educated me on a topic that I wouldn't have otherwise really ever thought about or known about. Every single one of these books, once I finished it, made me rethink or reappreciate some aspect of life, and I just really genuinely think that every single person could benefit from reading these books. But yes, that is it. I don't want to ramble too much longer. I genuinely do not have a plan as to what order I'm going to talk about these in, so I'm kind of just going to wing it. I hope you guys enjoy. So I just want to get this first book out of the way because if you guys have watched me for any amount of time, you already know that this book is going to be in this video, because if there is a singular book on this planet that I think every single person should read in their lifetime, it is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. It is also my favorite book of all time. I can't even explain how many life-altering quotes, concepts, storylines are in this book. Literally just thinking about it, just holding it in my hands does all types of things to my heart. Y'all have all probably heard of this book, seen this movie. I know that it's an old one. This book was literally like the book of 2012, 2013 Tumblr. I understand, but it's for a good reason. For the few of you that haven't read it, I will still kind of explain the basic premise. This book follows a girl named Hazel. She is a teenager with cancer. Every week, Hazel goes to this cancer support group, and she really doesn't love going at all, but this week she shows up and there is this new boy there that she does not recognize. He's very tall, he's very attractive, she's very confused, and whenever they end up going around in the circle at the support group, he explains his name is Augustus and that he's actually recovered from cancer, but he's just here supporting his best friend. And the cancer support group leader ends up asking Augustus, or Gus, if he has any fears, and he says that he fears oblivion. Basically, he intends to live a very special, extraordinary life, intends to do a bunch of great things, leave things behind, and his biggest fear is the idea of not getting to do that. And Hazel takes that opportunity to speak up and basically tells him, your fear is a waste of time, oblivion is inevitable, and we're all gonna die, so if you're really spending your time worrying about that, I recommend that you don't. And so that's kind of their initial meeting. After that, Hazel and Gus end up forming this friendship, forming this bond, later forming more. This book is full of so much just friendship and love and adventure. The most beautiful quotes I've ever seen in my life. Obviously, this book touches on the topic of cancer and just how brutal and horrific it is in people's lives and how unexpected and awful and unfair it is. And that is a big reason why I feel like everybody should read this. I think we all know cancer is awful, but like being in the head of somebody that is living with it and seeing others that they care about going through it, it's a completely horrific emotional experience, but it's something that I think that everyone could benefit from having to live through in one way or another. Also, just a lot of concepts of life and its meaning and what's important truly, and just it's one of those books that makes you regain your appreciation for those around you and your friends and just what you have in life. And genuinely, it's just the most stunning book. If you have not yet read it, I 100% recommend it. So I want to kind of lighten things up with this next book. I actually just read this one in this last month, and when I show it to you, you might be surprised, like, Nikki, that is a TikTok book, what are you doing? When I tell you that even though this book was enjoyable, it was a little steamy, it was a little fun rom-com moment, it really left me thinking in the end, and I still have been thinking about it over a month later. It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This book is about a girl named Piper. The story is actually based off of the show Schitt's Creek, so if you've seen that, things might sound familiar to you, but Piper is a socialite. She's basically a person that is famous for being famous. She's 28, her parents are rich, she's just grown up in the spotlight. She's never really had to work a day in her life, and the story pretty much starts out with Piper ending her longest relationship ever, all of 3 weeks. And to kind of get revenge on the guy, to kind of make herself feel better, Piper ends up throwing this massive party, and it's all over the news. It's a whole big scandal, and her stepdad is furious at her, and as a sort of punishment, he tells Piper that he is sending her to go live in this small fishing town in Washington. It's where her father grew up, and it's where he worked as a fisherman for many years. It's where her mother met her father. He owned a bar there, and he is sending Piper there to go live in the quarters above the bar for 3 months. He's giving her a small budget, but after that, she's kind of on her own because he wants her to learn responsibility, learn what it means to be an adult, and have to actually fend for yourself. Obviously, Piper is distraught over this. She's never had to work a day in her life. She's like, why are you doing this to me? I can't go to this small town for 3 months. Like, 3 months in the social media and LA world is like 3 years, but he says, too bad, you have to go anyways. So Piper ends up going to this town, and the story is actually from dual perspectives. So right away, we switch to the perspective of Brendan. He is this fisherman that has grown up in this town. He's lived there his whole life, and you can see right away he is not about Piper. She comes in here, she's a very spoiled girl, and he just feels like she's not gonna get this town. This is a very tight-knit community. She's walking in here with her stilettos. She doesn't appreciate it. She's gonna look down on it. He's not about her, but slowly Piper kind of starts to figure things out. Her and Brendan, even though they start out as enemies, start to form a bit of a bond. She ends up like fixing up this bar, and it's really a super cute, easy to read story. Kept me on the edge of my seat, in all honesty. There's lots of slow burn and there's lots of tension, but this story really has a beautiful message to it. We really get to see Piper grow and mature as an adult and figure out what's really important. Is it social media, or is it having people around you that actually care about you and want to see you succeed? And Piper really learns a lesson about like what she wants in life and what really matters to her, and the kind of person she wants to be, the kind of place she wants to live. It's really, again, and you're probably gonna sense a theme with these books, it's another story about just like what's really important in life and what do you really need at the end of the day to be happy. It was a great message. It was a great book. I totally feel like every person could, in one way or another, get something out of this book. So the next book I'm gonna talk about is one that was actually on my summer reading list back whenever I was in school. I'm almost positive I was in the 7th grade. So it's been well over 10 years since I've read this book, and the plot is still in my head, clear as day. It is Speak by Lori Hall Sanderson. I just so vividly remember this book rattling my 12-year-old brain. I remember not wanting to read it because it was assigned to us. Even though I've always loved to read, I've never been good with books that I have to read. I tried to take literature classes in college, and literally I had to drop them because I cannot read something if I'm being forced to read it. If it's like work, can't do it. I have to pick the books on my own. But this book was one of the few in school that like genuinely sucked me in and I could not put down. And once I finished it, I was just like, whoa. So this story follows a girl named Melinda. She is going into high school, and we're seeing her kind of on her first day. She's not excited at all to go. You can tell something is very wrong. She's very down. She's very depressed. She doesn't feel comfortable in her own skin, and she's starting out school, and everybody is pointing at her, picking on her, bullying her, including her best friend. She literally has like no friends, and we don't really understand why, but it is revealed very early on that the reason for that is because the summer before school started, Melinda ended up going to this party, and everybody at school was there, like all the popular kids were there, and Melinda ended up calling the cops on the party and busting it. And so because of that, everybody hates her. They're so mad at her. She literally ratted out the popular kids, and so they're all against her, and she is now a freshman starting in school, and she's literally like bottom of the barrel. The spotlight's on her. Everybody hates her. And we learn that there was kind of more to the story. Melinda didn't just call the cops to call the cops. She wasn't just ratting the party out. She called the cops because she needed them because the most popular guy in school was at this party. He is the star of the football team, the head jock, literally the most popular guy, the king of the school. And we learned that he actually ended up assaulting Melinda at this party in the worst way possible, and because of that, she's obviously been through the ringer, trauma, awful things. Her mental health is not in a good place. But this book is really so impactful because you get to see a victim's perspective of this entire thing, and it really, the whole aspect of it being that it is the most popular guy in school, you're seeing like how this guy runs this place and all these girls are in love with him, and here's Melinda over here, a freshman, just completely distraught over what this guy has done to her, and she knows he's like an evil monster, but everybody sees him as like the top guy and everybody looks up to him, and like, you know, he's probably gonna get scholarships to college. And it's just like a very emotional experience reading this book because you really get to see things from a different perspective. I feel like a lot of the times things like this do happen in real life, and because important people are involved, people that other people don't want to see go down, they're looked over. And you really get to see also the aspect of like victims not wanting to speak up because they, you know, don't think people are going to believe them, or people are not going to want to believe them. And the ending of this story I will literally never forget because it was just so like empowering and satisfying. And yeah, I know this is such a random book to recommend, but seriously, if you guys didn't have to read Speak by Laurie Hall Sanderson in school yourself, I would totally recommend it. I think that this should still be required reading. I know this is kind of like a scandalous topic, especially for a 7th grader to read, and especially at the time I was reading it, subjects like this were not openly talked about until the past few years, which is crazy because they truly do happen so often. But I really think people, especially like in high school, young people, like the earlier you can start to learn about these types of things and understand them from people's perspectives and just get a understanding of how often these things can happen and how easily they can happen, which is sad, it'll really just help you in the long run be more aware. Hi guys, popping in from the future. I'm editing this right now. I just wanted to mention that this book was actually made into a movie, and Kristen Stewart actually stars in it as the main character Melinda. Literally nobody talks about this movie. I feel like nobody knows it exists, but she was like the age of the character in this movie, like 14, and she absolutely killed the role. Like, this book was so good, but the movie portrayed it so perfectly. So I would totally recommend, if you do end up reading the book, watch the movie afterwards because it just really seals the deal. So yeah, I totally recommend everybody read this book if they haven't already. So whenever I was compiling this list, one book that kept coming to mind was a book that when I read it, it really did mean a lot to me. It really did impact me, but because of what it's become now, because of the show it's turned into, because everybody and their mother has seen it, I just don't feel that it will have the same impact. I'm talking about 13 Reasons Why. I read this book years ago. I don't even remember how I came across it, but there was no talks of it even becoming a show at that time. When I read that book, it really was an emotional experience. It really like touched me and made me rethink things and reminded me of like how important it is that we check on people, how important it is that we are aware of how we treat people and what we say to them. But again, because of the show, it just went off on some craziness that I do not want to associate myself with. If you have not yet watched the show and you haven't read the book yet, I totally recommend reading the book. But for those of you that haven't read the book but have seen the show and you don't want to read the book, I understand. So I'm going to talk about another book instead that deals with the same topic. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This book was so interesting, so thought-provoking. It really just was one that sat with me for like a full week after I finished it. I was just thinking about life, and I love books like that. So this story follows a woman named Nora. It starts about 48 hours before the time that Nora decides that she's going to end her own life. We're seeing how Nora is already not in a great place mentally, and then that kind of day before she decides, everything that could possibly go wrong in her life goes wrong. Like, it's just one after the other. And so we see Nora ultimately come to this decision that she just simply doesn't want to exist anymore. And once she goes ahead and takes the plunge, Nora ends up waking up and she is in this massive library and she's obviously very confused. There are literally thousands of books lined up on these shelves all around her. She ends up exploring for a little bit and she comes across her school librarian. And Nora's like, excuse me, Miss Elm, what are you doing here? What is going on? Where am I? And the librarian ends up explaining to Nora, you're in the Midnight Library. What all of these books are versions of your life that you could have had. All different versions that spurred from different decisions that you could have made that would have had a different result, a different outcome for you. And you now have the choice to go through and look at these books, see these different versions of your life, and you can choose to live whichever one you like the best, basically. And Nora at first is like, no, I don't want this. Like, I've decided I don't want to live anymore. And Miss Elm kind of talks her into it. She's like, don't you want to see? Don't you want to see what could have been? And Nora, we learn, is a person that has a lot of regrets in life. There's been a lot of decisions that she wishes she could have made differently, a lot of opportunities that she passed up, and she's just at this place where she feels like she's a complete failure. She's let everyone down, she's let herself down. And so once Miss Elm kind of talks her into this, she realizes like, okay, I'm willing to see what would have happened if I would have, you know, made some of my decisions differently. For example, I mean, she denied an engagement proposal. She was in a band that was about to take off and she ended up quitting. She was really good at a sport and she stopped playing it kind of at her peak. She was supposed to spontaneously moved to another country with one of her friends and at the last minute backed out. Just different things like that. So the entirety of this book is basically us seeing Nora living these different versions of her life. And as to be expected, once she starts living them, like every version seems like so much better and like, oh my God, yes, this is exactly what I've been missing. But you realize when your life turns out a different way, there are things from your original life that are now missing or different that you wish were still there. And it's just one of those books that kind of, again, reminds you what's important in life, kind of makes you question like, what is the true meaning of happiness? What does it take to make me happy? Is it really the situation I'm in, or is it me? And this book really just, again, it makes you think, and it wraps up in a really beautiful way, and it just reminds you that it's never too late to start your life over. It's never too late to become a different person or go relive your dream all over again. And yeah, I really think if you're going through a tough time right now, which I kind of was at the time I read this book, I was kind of feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. It's a great book if you're in that state of mind, but genuinely, I think just a great book for anybody that anybody could benefit from reading. So yeah, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. It was a good one. So again, switching back to something a little lighter, a little more fun, but still containing a great message, a great theme. The next book I want to talk about is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This story follows Alex and Henry. Alex is the son of the President of the United States, and Henry is the Prince of England. And they have never really liked each other in the time that Alex's mother has been the president. They've had to see each other at lots of political events. They've just never really gotten along, but one day they end up getting in like a very public fight. It makes the news. It's literally all over the place. So both of the countries are kind of doing damage control, and they basically are saying, Alex, Henry, you guys need to be friends and we need people to see you doing it. So they basically set up this fake kind of PR move that they're gonna go on these like friendship outings. They're gonna like go to sporting events, get lunches together, and they're gonna be photographed looking like they are having a good time and like they like each other, so people don't think that England and America hate each other and are like gonna go to war. And so both of the boys are not happy about this at all, but they end up, as to be expected, slowly realize they don't quite hate each other. They end up kind of realizing they have a lot of things in common, kind of form a friendship, kind of form a bond, and then before they realize it, it becomes something more. We're seeing this story from Alex's perspective, and Alex has never been with a guy before, never particularly had an interest in a guy before, but he doesn't really understand like why he's feeling this way about Henry. And this story is so cute. It's so funny. It has so many moments that just gave me absolute butterflies. but it really does have like a serious message at the root of it. You're getting to see what it's like for someone to be terrified of who they are, not knowing what's happening to them, afraid to be who they are for the world, especially on such a scale as Alex and Henry. I mean, they are like public figures. They're in the news, paparazzi follow them. Like this is something that doesn't just affect them, but affects their entire family, their family's reputation, their country's reputation, and it's absolutely terrifying. And it was really interesting and kind of very sad to see the perspective of that, realizing that some people genuinely have to be terrified to be who they are and just love who they want to love. All of the struggles and fear that come with that, the hiding and the sneaking around that comes from it, and it's just a great story. It's really so beautiful. It's so beautifully written. It, again, so many butterflies, but I really just think everybody could benefit from reading a story like this and understanding a little bit better what some people in the world have to go through. We've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go. So yeah, really love this book. I still think about it all the time. The next book I'm gonna talk about, I think everybody has heard of at this point. I mean, freaking Kylie Jenner has heard of it. She posted it on her Instagram story and the world exploded. It's also the video on my channel with the most views. So thank you guys so much for that. It still blows my mind how many people comment on this book and give their thoughts, because it really is a book that is so polarizing and makes so many people feel so many different types of ways. Like when I look at those hundreds of comments every single day, I do realize that this book really has impacted people just as much as it has me. I read it months ago and I still find myself thinking about it all the time. Like there is no other book that has ever had an effect on me in the way that this book has. Y'all have to know at this point what I'm talking about. It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is kind of a tricky one for me to talk about because everyone kind of knows what this book is about now. If you're like actively on Book Talk, you've probably heard about what this book is about. But I went into it entirely blind. I literally had no idea. I figured it was a romance and that's all I knew. I just knew people liked it, so I'm like, I'm just gonna read it. Colleen Hoover's great. Let's go. And because I went into it blind and I had no idea what was coming, I feel like I truly got to live this story and feel it through the main character's perspective, and it just had that much bigger, I've said the word impact 500 times in this video, but it just had that much bigger of an impact on me because I had no idea what's coming. So if you don't know what this book's about, literally don't look into it. I'm gonna give a very basic synopsis, but do not look into it. But I don't know, because there's definitely some trigger warning stuff. If you're not okay with certain things, this will be a hard book to read. But I'm telling you, every person needs to experience this book because it is insane and so important. But yes, basic synopsis. This story follows a girl named Lily. We're pretty much seeing two love stories happening at one time. We're seeing present day, her meeting this guy named Ryle. He completely sweeps her off her feet. Ryle is like the perfect dream guy. He is a surgeon. He's super smart, super witty, super smooth. Literally totally sweeps her off her feet. She's head over heels in love. And at the same time, Lily has just come across this old journal of hers in her closet, and she starts flipping through it and she realizes that this is a journal where she recounted her entire relationship with basically her first love in high school, this boy named Atlas. He went to school with her, they rode the bus together, and he was actually homeless. He got kicked out of his parents' house for lots of various reasons. It was just not a good upbringing for him, but he was staying in this abandoned house on Lily Street, and so they ended up forming this kind of bond and connection. And so you're kind of like reading through their story. Clearly, you know, like something happened with them that caused them to lose touch and not be together any longer. And then you're seeing present day, her like falling in love with Ryle. And this is just a book that touches on relationships and the idea of love and what that really means, and the way that we should treat each other, and seeing signs and catching red flags, and understanding a very particular aspect of relationships that I think a lot of people are very quick and easy to judge, genuinely myself included. Before I read this book, it's very easy to say you would know what you would do or how you would act in a certain situation with another person, but once you read it and you truly live the story from beginning to these certain things starting to happen, this book really makes you realize everything isn't so cut and dry and so easy and not just what you think it would be. And genuinely, as much of an emotional roller coaster as this book was, as much as it physically hurt me, I think every person would benefit from reading it. So it ends with us. Colleen Hoover, one of my queens, but she hurts me on a daily basis. And the last book I want to touch on, this video is probably at least 30 minutes long. I hope you guys grabbed a snack before you started, but I want to talk about Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. Penelope Douglas, you guys might be judging. You might be like, Nikki, excuse me, Penelope Douglas, she's known for writing some spicy things. And you know what? You'd be right. Penelope Douglas does write some spicy things, but she also writes just genuinely incredible stories, and she is my favorite author, so we will not accept any Penelope slander in this house. Punk 57, of all of her books, and I've read all of her standalones at this point, I think almost all of her books altogether now at this point, is her best book. I always think Penelope's books have a great balance of like spicy romance and plot, but this book, the spice is still there, trust me, but the plot and the story and the message of this book just completely wins out. Like, the spice is just an extra added treat on top. This story follows a guy named Misha and a girl named Ryan. They were paired up as pen pals whenever they were in the 5th grade. Their teachers got confused because they both have kind of like gender neutral names. Ryan is a girl, Misha's a boy. They were paired up by accident, but Misha and Ryan ended up totally hitting it off. They actually ended up keeping up this whole pen pal act all the way into high school. It was just meant to be like a little thing they did in school, but they kept it up because they ended up becoming super close friends. They still write each other letters every couple of days, but they made a pact that they were never gonna let it be anything more than that. They weren't gonna exchange phone numbers. They weren't gonna look each other up on social media because they just wanted to keep their pen palship this special protected thing. And Misha over the years has really grown to love Ryan because she really just like isn't like most girls. They really bonded over the idea of both of them being outcasts. Misha is in a band and Ryan just always talks to Misha about her struggles of feeling like she doesn't fit in and not understanding why girls are so mean. And Misha has really grown to love Ryan over the years, but something happens at the beginning of this book where Misha ends up unintentionally figuring out who Ryan is. He sees her out in public, he puts 2 and 2 together. Oh my god, this is Ryan, and he's very upset because she's not who he thought she was. Ryan has always complained and hated that mean popular cheerleader girl, and when Misha meets her, he realizes that she is that girl. She is that mean popular school bully cheerleader girl. Not at all who she's portrayed in her letters. And yeah, Misha is just completely heartbroken. Something at the same time that this happens ends up happening in Misha's personal life, so he pretty much stops writing to Ryan. And just like all Penelope Douglas books, you end up seeing multiple perspectives. So now we're seeing Ryan's perspective and she's like, oh my god, why isn't Misha writing to me? At the same time, this new boy shows up at her school named Mason, and we know, but she doesn't know, Mason is actually Misha. And Misha is pretty much, we know he's there for a certain reason. It's not straight up for Ryan, but he's made it his mission at the same time that he's pretty much gonna put Ryan in her place. He's gonna dethrone her. He wants to give her a taste of her own medicine because he's just so heartbroken and upset over this girl who has pretty much lied to him for the past like 8-9 years, made him think that she's someone she's not, made him fall in love with her. And it turns into a very tense kind of enemies to lovers, spicy romance, and it's so good. But genuinely, the message beneath this book, all the way through it to the end, it just touches on the idea of the pressures put on us in school. The desire to be popular, to fit in, to want people to like you, and the lengths we often end up going to achieve that. And I feel like every person in one way or another can relate to this book. I certainly, even though you want to hate Ryan in the beginning, once I got more inside of her head, I certainly saw a lot of myself in her. I could really understand the pressure of not feeling like you're good enough in school and feeling like you want to be like those cool people, even though in reality a lot of times those cool people really aren't even happy, but you just don't know that. And it's again another one of those books about what's really important. Do you really care what people think? Is it worth treating others badly? It's just, it's a great read. It's really good and entertaining, but just super thought-provoking, and I totally recommend it. And that is all I have for you guys today. If you have read any of these books, let me know your thoughts about them down below. If you guys have any other recommendations of books similar to these that you feel every person could benefit from reading, totally drop them down below. I love recommendations. I love thought-provoking books that make me question my life and my morals, anything like that. It's a great time. But yes, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you all very soon. Bye!